Hi there, I'm Tom Field, Senior Vice President of Editorial with Information Security Media Group. Topic of conversation is non-intrusive security. I am delighted to be speaking with Richard Bird. He's the new CISO with Traceable AI. Richard, it is always a pleasure to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, I probably should stop changing my chair so frequently. We get an opportunity to talk at each stop, but I always have a lot of excitement when we get an opportunity to get together. Tom, thank you very much.
Not glad to have you. Hey, I got a question for you. What is the definition of insanity as it relates to cybersecurity?
Wow. I mean, the old adage about insanity being doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Always difficult to figure out who that actual quote comes from. Everyone says Albert Einstein, but that's proven to be not true. That really is a dimension of insanity that we're facing within cybersecurity solutions as well as cybersecurity practice. We think about the structure of cybersecurity frameworks today, and lots of people are out touting that I'm working, in a zero trust framework, or I'm working in a defense in depth framework, and then you get breached through a VPN, which basically invalidates both of those statements and suggests that you're still working under an OSI 7-layer network model from, I think 83, as the structure and architecture of your cybersecurity program. And I think that there's a bit of a challenge within the cybersecurity solution space, as well as within how cybersecurity is being executed within the corporate government agency enterprise space. And that is this continuous repeating of whatever the new messaging is about technologies or frameworks, and then still having about 95% of your actual compute and technology landscape stuck in these old models. And I think that there's an additive dimension of it's not just doing the same things over and over again. It's the bit of that intellectual dishonesty that's going on today, that's saying just simply because I say I do zero trust, I must be doing zero trust. And in reality, we're all aware that we're not doing zero trusty kind of things in the background. And that level of cognitive dissonance in what we want to do and what's actually being done, I think, is creating an escalating curve of cyber losses and cyber crimes, exploits, breaches, because we've kind of gotten ourselves into a bit of an echo chamber.
Well, you've also got a lot of people celebrating digital transformation, which to them means they get to work anywhere they want with anything they want. You're a little frustrated with how security teams have responded to digital transformation.
Yeah, so I'm old, and I remember when I was a program lead back in my younger days for a digital transformation program. We're talking 24 years ago, and we keep rolling out these same labels, and the truth is that digital transformation really has been successfully executed across the entire commercial landscape, government landscape for years and years. Is there still paper? Sure. Most of that stuff is information and data that's locked up, locked away, still accessible, but it doesn't generate any additional value to anybody to take and migrate that information. When I hear digital transformation today, what I'm really hearing is a need in the business world in particular to do things faster and cheaper and create better experiences. That's all great, right? But faster and cheaper is a pathway to bad security outcomes. I know people want security to be inexpensive relative to their overall spend, but when it comes to budget, but we're dealing with adversaries who have no budget meetings, who have no forecasted, spend and run rates, who have no needs to manage business expectations around user experiences. The agility and flexibility that comes for the bad guys isn't because they're technologically superior. The agility comes because as we move down these digital transformation journeys and make this big deal about let's not have friction, let's not make things difficult, let's make things, as easy as possible, comes with the security consequence and reality that if it's easy for your customer, it's easy for the bad guys. And that whole notion of having, I love old words, stewardship. Nobody talks about it anymore. That responsibility that we have in terms of people's data and their privacy and their security has been lost as a notion of stewardship. So these rushes to greatness that we execute in digital transformation come at a cost of forgetting the role that we play as good stewards for all of the things that are related to those individual customers. And I think that that's, we're really barreling down a path of technology and technological improvement for the sake of technology and technological improvement. And I think that the detrimental impact of that is it's leaving out the reality of the human equation, because we want to be cooler, we want to be faster, we want to provide more choices, we want to do more connection at the application layer so that this data can move there. And it just violates the premise of that stewardship that we should be held accountable for.
So we'll take the term digital transformation, set it aside. What does need to be done in this new expanding world of API security or API insecurity?
I like the API insecurity reference, Tom. Being in this space of API security now, after a pretty diverse career in cybersecurity, a lot of folks know me because of identity specifically, but I was a CISO. Like, I had to manage the whole remit in the course of my career, and what I find really incredible as I'm walking, through halls and talking to, a number of people on API security, is how many folks have completely separated history, data, and evidence from the growth curve in API security. I've had people, senior executives who've told me I don't have an API security problem because I have a gateway and because I have a WAF. And I kind of stopped for a second and I said, well, let me ask, are you a hybrid organization? Do you have on-premises still and large business applications that you were unable to refactor to cloud? And your cloud journey, I mean, Satya Nadella said 2021 at Ignite that we've reached peak aggregation, cloud aggregation. What he's saying is that if you haven't refactored that code already to cloud, you're probably never going to do it, right? And in the context of that, conversation with those, senior executives, I say, so you have a hybrid environment, so your firewall is 100% of your security, right? And of course, that gives you strange looks. And I said, well, look, I said, if you can't say with confidence that the firewall is, your security strategy for everything in your on-premises environment, you do know that WAF stands for Web Application Firewall. It's literally the virtualized and conceptualized equivalent of how you manage traffic and inputs and outputs and blacklisting, whitelisting. And they pause for a second, typically. And I say, we have taken APIs and we have now moved, after a dozen years with true commercial API enablement, we've moved into a world where we're in the next evolutionary stage of virtualization. Right? We started at the infrastructure and the appliance level. We've run through that part of the evolution. We are now at the very, I'll use terms that are frequently used as we're kicking around zero trust terms. We still call it layer 7 security, right? That security needed as applications are now becoming the prime intersect for all data, all transactions, the passing of information back and forth. And yet that layer has historically had the worst track record in terms of security, not the fault of developers. I want to make sure I'm really clear on that. Developers are in business to create value based upon business needs, right? They are the translation layer to make technology do cool things. And our expectation of demands for heightened cybersecurity awareness, or this is how API security is going to get you, because a API that you build to do one thing can be abused to do 10 other things. To have that expectation of those developers is just kidding ourselves, because history clearly shows that human beings really stink at personal risk and security management. And developers are people, last I checked. So this API security layer is right now laboring with a huge amount of misperception that I don't have a security problem. And that's okay, right? The actual activities of the last 4 or 5 months on the part, or 4 or 5 weeks on the part of the bad actors are clearly showing that that assumption is wrong. The traffic that looks like it's supposed to be good can actually be malicious and not be caught by things like gateways and WAFs. That's actually the predominant way that that these breaches happen, and there will be that kind of wake up in the morning in shock among a lot of our leaders when they realize that the statements that they've been making about "I'm okay" in this space were grossly exaggerated.
So you explained the security problem well when you talk about the involvement of people. How do we get to it, as you call it, non-intrusive security?
Oh, I think that we embrace the patterns that have historically been a part of human evolution. I always use the example of the beat cop, and let me stop for just a second, because one of the things that I get is like a lot of people are like, "Oh, great, you use these like quaint, rustic metaphors and analogies, and that's not really how the digital world works." I mean, let's not ascribe mysticism to technology. It's a better tractor, right? It is a means of production, and it may be a personal means of production as it relates to our social media lives and all that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, technology is a tool that accomplishes production, delivery of value, right? And when we take away the mysticism and we look to patterns that have historically been successful, we have tons of them in our history and in our own personal lives. And I always like to use non-intrusive security. I like to use the notion of the beat cop. Now, many folks that are watching may not have beat cops in their neighborhood, right?
I have
But
a sheriff's department, by the way.
yeah, and but the beat cop's job is, especially the poor kid that's a rookie, is he's 3 a.m. patrolling the neighborhood. You don't know he's there. You have no idea what his name is. You have no need to understand the mechanics of police enforcement, law, anything like that is being done for you. And then the result is that your neighborhood is safer. Your family, your children are safer. Is it fail safe? Obviously not, right? It doesn't mean that bad things can't happen. It means that there is a layer of security that is happening on your behalf that doesn't require your intervention. It doesn't require you to increase your knowledge. It doesn't require you to improve your sensitivities on all the bad things that might be out there. And this is one of the things that I think is really interesting, because if you go back to the original question of insanity, the market as well as enterprise corporations are constantly talking about, let's just make people smarter about security. People are actually pretty smart about security. The only problem is, back to my statement about, we really stink at personal risk and security management, is that dynamic changes when we're threatened. Every human being on the planet becomes an expert in security and risk management with the manifestation of a threat. And this idea of non-intrusive security is providing a way to disintermediate the potential for that moment of realization that, oh my gosh, I'm now threatened, by negating and invalidating the threats outside of the view of a company, outside of the view of an individual. To me, this is the way that, and obviously it's my opinion, and it's up for debate, but I think this is really the way that we need to start thinking as cybersecurity practitioners and solutions deliverers on how to apply and exercise security. Use the patterns that we know work, accommodate for the fact that the big difference is volume and speed, especially in the API world, a lot of volume, a lot of speed. But go back to what we know is effective, as opposed to continuing to rely on models that have been proven by data and results that are ineffective. right? Go back to the, the layered model of security. I don't know that there's any concept that has been proven more wrong by results than layered security. And yet here we are. It's still the predominant mode of providing, security in the marketplace.
So, Richard, in this world of non-intrusive security, actually sounds like an NFL film's introduction. In a world of non-intrusive security, what's the value of data and context?
Wow. Let me pull the second word out of there first, the context piece. The absence of context in the way that we manage all aspects of security has been, frankly, one of the biggest blunders that we've made ever since the beginning of compute, really. I've used the reference before. Ever since the arrival of the first account and password in 1961 at MIT, that was hacked within 11 hours by the graduate students, right? The context piece is now becoming a huge component of people's thinking around security. And when we look at context, it is the need for intelligence, information, inputs, signals that give us an understanding of, as our friend loves to use the Kipling method, right? Who, what, where, when, why. The key questions that really allow us to deliver not just security, but experiences, right? On the customer experience side or the user experience side, being able to understand the information that answers each of those questions is what delivers a contextually aware security result, a contextually aware customer experience, transactions, so on and so forth. That's been missing because we are still in a world of, again, patterns in history that have proven themselves not to work. Last I checked, nobody's really building a castle with a moat anymore, right? People are building air defense systems that are predictive, and they're utilizing the context of, current state warfare and engagement and all of the information that's coming in from that. And that context piece is now being aggressively pursued within the solution side by a number of organizations. I want to just make a quick caveat, though, because we're all quickly coming to a conclusion, and this is certainly the case within the API world, where there's so much access to so much data. We're quickly coming up into that brick wall of conversation and debate around, okay, now how do we manage privacy, and how do we manage? I mean, contextually, I've got a tremendous amount of intelligence about this individual, and I couple that with the actual data, and now I have a really rich, digital version of a thing, but I also have a tremendous amount of information that is sensitive, could be personal, could be, proprietary if we're talking about relationships between partners, and so I don't think that we've really kind of bridged the ethical and academic concerns as it relates, and governance concerns as it relates to this contextual side of the equation. But contextual security is not an API specific trend. It is going to be, data enriched information about things is going to be where we're heading from a security standpoint for many years to come.
Richard, what is it that attracts you to Traceable AI? And now that you're in this role, how are you helping your customers evolve their approach to cybersecurity?
Well, a contentious statement warning, Richard always has to give those. I mentioned it before, and, Tom, you and I have talked about this so many times. My reputation in the solutions side after coming out of corporate, my reputation in the last several years has been heavily oriented towards the identity domain within security. And a contentious statement is, on my part, is that I worry, and it was a motivator for me to step into a new domain, API security, application security. I worry that the identity solution space is so constrained by the models of the past that, passwordless arose and everyone talked about, this is the next best thing since, sliced toast or sliced bread and a toaster, right? The problem with that is that passwordless is just iterative. It's the next iteration of strong authentication. It's still dependent upon all of the necessary good behaviors and best practice execution in order for you able to be able to work right. I mean, Andre at Ping, one of my favorite people on the planet that I work for, always said it best. Passwordless is great, but if you authenticate the wrong person, you still have a bad day. And when we look at these constructs that the identity solution space is constrained by, we're still talking about directories. We're still not using security language when it comes to the human attack surface or the threat vectors of identity or identity intelligence. We don't really talk about any of that. So my great concern in the identity space after years of being obviously strongly tied to it is that there's not space being given by the market for innovation. And with API security, it's nascent, right? We're playing catch up, right? Historically, application developers and engineers are 3 to 8 years ahead of security in every single technological innovation, which means that we are years behind as it relates to securitizing APIs and providing capabilities for visibility and guardrails and all that. That's exciting. Like, it allows you the opportunity to not just innovate, but to really drive towards a possible new construct for how we deliver security, whether it's non-intrusive, whether it's in a way that maybe everybody in the future has their own API, right? And that API is how I then provide permissioning for you to use my data, not use my data, delete my data, transfer my data. Maybe that's the world that we potentially have coming, but I don't think that there are the mechanics available within the identity solution space writ large to be able to execute on that. Now, I want to wrap it back around, because one of the most entertaining parts about moving to API security and everyone thinking that I pulled the cord and abandoned identity is if you look at the OWASP top 10 relative to security threats for APIs, 30% of them are about identity.
Right.
And in the end, security is still rooted at its core, whether it's the hard security trades or things like threat intelligence or things like identity. It is rooted in this basis of identity. So I'm not leaving. I'm just going to the next zip code over. And I would also just add real quick, like Traceable. I mean, if you take a second, those of you who are watching, I won't overhype it at all. But if you take a second and look at the founders that are involved, what they've done in the past, for someone like me, it's a dream job to just be able to walk in with people that have had tremendous amounts of experience and success in the startup space. For a guy that labored in the salt mines of corporate for a long time, this is. At my age, I shouldn't be having as much fun as I'm having at this stage of my career, but I'm having a blast, and Traceable is a really significant part of that.
That's terrific. Let me ask you a couple of questions. One, given how organizations are shifting to distributed microservices architectures, what are your thoughts on flexible deployment models?
Flexible deployment models are an absolute necessity. I kind of come back to something that I mentioned about the bad actors, right? Bad actors aren't beating us with technology. Bad actors are beating us with really substantial amount of flexibility and agility that has been, atrophied, right? And within flexibility and agility within the corporate sector and government sectors in particular are just atrophied, right? We love to say that we're flexible and agile. It's not really true, right? We love to say that moving to things like Agile and Scrum and moving to all of these, getting away from waterfall SDLCs and all of that has improved our flexibility and agility. And again, evidence clearly shows the bad guys are 10, 20, 30 times more flexible and agile. I think flexible deployment capabilities and flexible deployment strategies are fundamental to changing that. It comes with the challenge that we all, recognize, which is, operations are still operations. Operations risk is still operations risk. And we can't ever put ourselves in a situation where, which we've seen recently, we're executing deployments that actually increase our risk. Right? We do a deployment, we actually leave an endpoint and API input publicly exposed. That's actually happened in the last couple of weeks. We have to take the flexible deployment models and capabilities, and we need to build in, again, the layer of non-intrusive security, where APIs are being monitored, understood, behavior patterns of those APIs are not just, guessed at as being anomalous, right? We're putting a tremendous amount of, rich data into analytic tools that are showing us, how an API is morphing and changing over time to be used for bad things. We've got to have those capabilities because flexible deployment models are great, but if you leave that part out, you've just created a gun that will, blow your head off faster, right? Which isn't what we should be going for, right? We don't want to create models that allow us to be flexible and agile, but then just exponentially increase the risk of self-harm and damage to ourselves because of irresponsible use of those capabilities.
Richard, last question. Why should companies consider vendors who can deploy into multiple environments? And boy, I could list them off, but you know them.
Because nothing in technology ever dies. I think that, there are a lot of different business reasons. I think there are fewer technical reasons, but a lot of, important business reasons, whether it's distribution of risk, management of compliance regulations, right? I want to use this particular cloud solutions provider, but I've got data control and restrictions because it's in this nation or this region. I think that the kind of the diversity available from infrastructure capabilities and application deployment capabilities is incredible. It's probably the key benefit to cloud strategies, hybrid strategies, because now we don't have to navigate with a tremendous amount of trickery, our global expansions, how we operate in this region versus how we operate in that region, or how we respond to, catastrophic world events, right? As we've seen, the need to extract assets, value, and data out of, areas of the world that have chosen to do things that have put them, in a category where we no longer do business with them. The capability to extract ourselves from those events and those situations comes with this cloud capability. I think that when we think about the strategies, though, that are associated with this, we run into the same problem as we talked about with flexible deployment patterns, which is what did Jeff Goldblum say for Jurassic Park? You thought just because you could do a thing, you should do a thing, right? That rush to greatness to be a multi-cloud strategy, that rush to greatness to move, into this particular instance in this particular region, once again, frequently comes without the understanding of, what's needed in being able to underpin the security in those decisions. But more importantly, not a lot of good thinking about what the unintended consequences of those choices might be, right? To gain incremental, value, incremental revenue opportunity, whatever, making a huge decision on changing your overall platforming strategy to achieve that just to get a small gain, it's really something that we should be putting into the equation. And many times I don't feel that it is.
Richard, great conversation, always is. Thanks so much for your time today.
Tom, had a great time. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
Again, the topic is non-intrusive security. Just heard from Richard Bird. He's a CISO with Traceable AI. For Information Security Media Group, I'm Tom Field. Thank you for giving us your time and attention today.